A Vinton County grand jury today has issued indictments in 3 criminal cases involving sexual abuse and child endangerment.
Gary and Elizabeth Siders accused of sexually abusing a child together, as 2 of their family members also face charges related to sexually abusing children. I'll take you inside the investigation, how these people are related, where the children are now, and what Siders' family members are saying.
A search warrant for one man's DNA led investigators to a house where 16 children were found living in bad conditions. And that's not even the twist. That's where this story starts. I'm going to walk you through the entire Siders family case, from the very first phone call to the grand jury indictments that came down this week. And I want you to pay close attention to the timeline, because the order these events happened in tells you almost as much as the charges themselves. This all begins in Vinton County, Ohio, in December of 2025.
A grand jury today has issued indictments in 3 criminal cases involving sexual abuse and child endangerment. These charges stem from criminal investigations conducted by the Vinton County Sheriff's Office and the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations, BCI. The cases are being prosecuted by the Vinton County Prosecutor's Office with the assistance from the Highland County Prosecutor's Office and the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit. In December of 2025, at the request of the Vinton County Sheriff's Office, BCI's Special Victims Unit opened an investigation into allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. Information obtained in this investigation prompted BCI in March of 26 to open a second investigation, this one involving allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. On June 30th, authorities executed a search warrant at a residence in Hamden, Ohio, and Vinton County on Ohmer Street. There have been a lot of speculation and questions regarding the June 30th presence on Ohmer Street in Hamden. These indictments provide some insight into the ongoing investigation. However, to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation and to protect the victims, I conclude my statement here. I am thankful for the work of my deputies and our fellow partners at BCI.
That's when the Vinton County Sheriff's Office asked the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation's Special Victims Unit to open a case. The allegations at that point involved 2 children and claims of sexual abuse. Not the Siders' children. We'll get to that distinction, and it matters. What investigators learned during that first case reportedly pushed them further. In March of 2026, BCI opened a second investigation. This one centered on allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. And it's this second investigation that leads directly to Gary Siders Jr. and his wife, Elizabeth Siders.
This case is going to be prosecuted by myself, Kara Keating, Assistant Attorney General, and Annika Collins, Highland County Prosecuting Attorney. Thank you.
So let's break down what William Archer said. He said they went to the house on Ohmer Street on June 30th with a warrant for Gary Siders Jr.'s DNA. They wanted his DNA so they could conduct genetic testing. Why conduct genetic testing? Did the alleged victim in this case possibly have DNA evidence that she shared with investigators? Or was a child possibly born as a result of this abuse? The Attorney General says the investigation into Gary Jr. and Elizabeth started in March of 2026. The search warrant on Ohmer Street wasn't executed until June 30th, nearly 4 months later. Clearly, they had trouble tracking down Gary Jr. and Elizabeth. They were not easy to find. But when they did, they tracked them to the house on Ohmer Street, and that is where they found the 16 Siders children.
That's when authorities finally executed a search warrant at a residence in Hamden, Ohio, on Ohmer Street, about 3.5 months after that March investigation opened. Investigators have said Gary Siders Jr. wasn't easy to track down. So ask yourself, what happened during those months as investigators worked to locate him? What that warrant was actually for is one of the most unsettling details in this entire case. Investigators went there to obtain Gary Siders Jr.'s DNA for genetic testing. Why does a case need DNA like that?
And it does appear now, in my reading of all of the documents and all of the records and the press releases and piecing this all together, that we have 3 victims here. We have 2 initial victims in investigation 1, and then 1 victim in investigation 2, and that is the victim involving Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders. And so they went to the house looking for Gary Siders Jr.'s DNA for genetic testing. Mark, what does that tell you? I mean, that says to me, I'm wondering if the victim in this case became pregnant.
That's possible, although that's not one of the elements of any of these crimes. As I mentioned, one of the elements, certainly for sexual battery, is whether or not you're a parent or acting in the role of a parent of somebody, and you would have sexual activity with that child. That could have been the reason.
A special prosecutor who's worked sex crimes cases in Ohio laid out two possibilities. Either the alleged victim came forward with physical evidence, clothing, bedding, something that could be matched. Or there's a question of paternity. A pregnancy that would tie an alleged abuser directly to a child. Investigators haven't confirmed which one applies here. But if you noticed that detail buried in the warrant, before anyone spelled it out for you, you were already ahead of most people watching this case unfold. When deputies arrived to execute that warrant, they didn't just find Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders. They found 16 children living at that residence, ranging in age from 1.5 to 18 years old. Officials have described the conditions they were living in as bad.
These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse. Law enforcement sought the DNA of Gary Siders Jr. related to the child sex abuse case. Once Siders Jr. was located, search warrants were executed to secure his DNA for genetic testing. Upon serving the search warrants for the child sex abuse case, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Ohmer Street house became known. The child sex abuse cases involve intra-family relations and do not pose a risk to the general public, and I would also add, does not involve human trafficking. This case all started with diligent Dollar General clerks calling authorities with concerns over children they observed. We ask the public to be mindful of the circumstances around them, especially involving children. We continue to ask for the public's respect for the rights and privacy of the child victims in this case.
Those 16 children are now in therapeutic foster care. I want to be precise here, because this is the point where a lot of coverage gets it wrong. Investigators and prosecutors have stated that none of those 16 children are alleged victims of sexual abuse. What they are facing are child endangerment charges, tied to their living conditions, not to sexual abuse allegations. The case prosecutors are still building includes charges against Gary Siders Jr., Elizabeth Siders, and the children's grandparents, Gary Siders Sr. and Christina Siders as well.
16 Siders children who are now in therapeutic foster care. Those were all second-degree felonies when they were first charged. Now some of those are second-degree felonies, some are third, some are misdemeanor counts, both for Gary and Elizabeth, and then Grandma and Grandpa. What do you make of those charges being reduced in some respects? I mean, they're still charged with it, and they're innocent until proven guilty, but they're not all F2s anymore.
Yeah, the difference in these charges is the damage done to the victim. And so the more damage, the higher potential to get up to the F2, which is up to 8 years in prison. There's also a misdemeanor level child endangerment. I've seen those cases. I've worked on those cases. Careless parent allows a child to sort of run outside into the street, 3-year-old or something. That's typically a misdemeanor child endangerment. Nothing bad happened, but the parent was being careless. So remember, prosecutors have to prove the level of injury, either psychological or physical, to the victim in order to match that level of crime.
Reduced charges are not the same as no charges. They're still facing them. And under the law, they are presumed innocent unless and until proven otherwise. Now let's talk about the sexual abuse allegations directly involving Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders, because this is a separate matter entirely from the 16 children. Both are charged with 2 counts of sexual battery and 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. All third-degree felonies. The alleged victim is not one of their own children.
I have new details for you about this incredibly disturbing sexual abuse investigation into Gary Siders Jr. and his wife, Elizabeth Siders, and the investigation that started it all. Gary Jr. and Elizabeth have been in jail since June 30th, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. I can tell you that. Both are now charged with sex crimes against a minor who was more than 10 years younger than they were from January to September 2022. That's when the alleged abuse took place. At that time, Elizabeth would have been 29 years old and Gary Jr. would have been 32, and Elizabeth was pregnant with twins during part of that time. Those twins died the same day they were born. Gary Jr. and Elizabeth face 4 felony charges, 2 counts of sexual battery. Those are felonies in the 3rd degree, and 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, also 3rd-degree felonies. The alleged victim in this case is not one of Gary Jr. and Elizabeth's children, but they are related to the victim. And the victim was quite young when the alleged abuse took place over 9 months in 2022. Here's the Vinton County prosecutor discussing the charges after the grand jury returned the indictment.
But is, according to investigators, related to them. Prosecutors say the alleged abuse took place over roughly 9 months in 2022, when the victim was quite young. Here's a detail that adds a disturbing layer to the timeline. During part of that period, Elizabeth Siders was pregnant with twins. Those twins reportedly died the same day they were born. I'm not going to speculate on what that means for this case.
Gary Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders both face sexual battery charges related to a child. They're both charged with that, along with unlawful sexual misconduct or conduct with a minor. So does that, if you're a prosecutor, for Elizabeth to be charged with that, does that mean she was an active participant in this sexual misconduct, or was she simply aware of it?
You have to be more than aware to be guilty of those crimes. If they wanted to charge a complicity charge, they could do that. It's a different way of saying, well, you didn't do it, but you were involved in helping it happen. But to be guilty of the charge, you have to meet all the elements, and simply being aware of it, other than the child endangering piece, which being aware of something that's being done to a child and doing nothing about it, obviously can be child endangering. But for these sex crimes, you have to be guilty of each of the elements of the sex crime, and being aware of it is not one of those elements.
A special prosecutor was direct about this. Under Ohio law, awareness alone doesn't meet the legal threshold for these specific sex crime charges. To be convicted, prosecutors have to prove every element of the crime itself, not just knowledge of it. If prosecutors believed she assisted without directly participating, that's a different charge entirely, one that hasn't been filed. What has been filed are the same charges her husband is facing. Now, remember that first investigation, the one that started in December of 2025, before anyone had heard the name Siders. That case involves 2 other men, 23-year-old Josh Saunders and 40-year-old Brandon Henderson. And this is where the family tree gets complicated, so stay with me. Josh Saunders is Gary Jr.'s nephew, the oldest son of Gary's sister Virginia, who reportedly goes by Jenny.
So in December 2025, the Vinton County Sheriff and BCI started investigating allegations of sexual abuse of 2 children. And remember, the prosecutor said alert Dollar General clerks called and reported concerns they had over children that they saw. Well, that first investigation involved 2 men. Those men are 23-year-old Josh Saunders and 40-year-old Brandon Henderson. You might be wondering, who are these 2 men and how are they connected to the Siders? Well, I'm going to tell you. Josh Saunders is Gary Jr.'s nephew. He's the oldest son of Gary Jr.'s sister Virginia, who goes by Jenny. And Brandon Henderson is her longtime boyfriend and the father of some of her children. Brandon and Virginia have lived in Gallia County, Vinton County, and Bloomer, Wisconsin. The Vinton County prosecutor had said previously that the Siders had lived for a time in Wisconsin. This may be the reason why. While Virginia Saunders has been with Brandon Henderson for many years, she is still legally married to Josh Saunders' father. Records show that Joshua Saunders and Virginia Saunders were married in April 2003 in Gallia County, but Joshua Saunders Jr. is actually serving time in an Ohio prison for murder. He's been behind bars since 2009.
Brandon Henderson is Virginia's longtime boyfriend and the father of some of her children. Virginia and Brandon have reportedly lived in Gallia County, Ohio, Vinton County, Ohio, and Bloomer, Wisconsin, which lines up with earlier reporting that the Siders family spent time in Wisconsin.
What's so disturbing about this is the fact that we have family members, and they're saying right now that the 16 Siders children, that nobody is accused of sexually abusing them. Thank goodness, if there's a silver lining in this, that has not happened according to what we're being told right now. However, there are other children, extended family members of the Siders, who prosecutors are saying were sexually abused at the hands of Gary and Elizabeth, and what appears to be Gary's nephew, Joshua Saunders, and his brother-in-law, like the longtime boyfriend of his sister, Virginia. So this is very disturbing. And we had heard there was this Wisconsin connection, Bloomer, Wisconsin. When they first arrested them, they said this family had been up in Bloomer, Wisconsin, or Wisconsin at one point in time. And now we're seeing that Virginia and Brandon at one point lived in Bloomer, Wisconsin. So that's where this connection came together, it looks like.
There's another layer here worth mentioning. Virginia is reportedly still legally married to Josh Saunders' father, a man who has been serving time in an Ohio prison for murder since 2009. Earlier this year, a Gallia County court ordered Brandon Henderson and that same man to undergo paternity testing tied to Virginia's children and child support. Those children are no longer in Virginia's custody.
Those children are no longer in Virginia's custody. The grand jury indicted 23-year-old Josh Saunders on 4 counts, 3 counts of rape and 1 count of gross sexual imposition. The indictment claims that Josh Saunders raped a 9-year-old child between January 2020 and December 2020. There's a second rape charge that claims a child between the ages of 10 and 12 was sexually assaulted between December 2020 and December 2023, a 3-year period. And a third rape charge covers an allegation of sexual assault between June 2022 and June 2023. The grand jury indicted Brandon Henderson on 21 counts. 1 count of endangering children, 2 counts of endangering children, 4 counts of gross sexual imposition, 4 counts of gross sexual imposition, 8 counts of sexual battery, 2 counts of endangering children, and those were misdemeanors. Brandon Henderson faces charges related to allegations of sex crimes involving a child over a period of many years.
The grand jury indicted Josh Saunders on 4 counts, 3 counts of rape and 1 count of gross sexual imposition, involving allegations spanning from 2020 into 2023. Brandon Henderson faces 21 counts, including multiple counts of gross sexual imposition, sexual battery, and both felony and misdemeanor child endangerment charges, tied to allegations covering a period of several years. A prosecutor summarized it this way. Across both investigations, there are 3 victims total. 2 tied to the Saunders and Henderson case, and 1 tied to Gary and Elizabeth Siders. That's separate from the 16 children found in the home. If you're having trouble keeping all these names and relationships straight, you're not alone. Even the special prosecutor covering this case said he needed an organizational chart to sort it out. So where does this go from here? The Ohio Attorney General's office has publicly stated the investigation is not finished. Given how this case has already grown from a single tip to 3 separate criminal cases, that statement carries some weight. Family members are already reacting. The wife of Elizabeth Siders' brother, Joey Russell, posted on Facebook that if these allegations are proven true, the family is done with her, that harming children is something they won't forgive. On the other side, an attorney representing Gary Siders Sr., the children's grandfather, has pushed back on the scope of the case, pointing out that the number of felony counts against his client has already dropped from 17 to 16 to 10 in the span of about 6 weeks, with 6 misdemeanor counts added. He's framed that as evidence the state's case is still being built in real time, while the defense investigation has yet to truly begin in earnest.
The wife for Joey Russell, the brother of Elizabeth Siders, posted on Facebook that if the allegations about Elizabeth are proven true, that they are basically done with Elizabeth, that you cannot harm children. And the attorney for Gary Siders Sr. issued a statement saying, "What we do know is that the original complaint filed against Mr. Siders Sr. charged him with 17 felonies of the second degree. The amended complaint filed 2 days later listed 16 felonies of the second degree, and the indictment just handed down by the grand jury, in a process where the defense has no ability to participate or present evidence whatsoever, handed down only 10 felonies of the lesser third degree and 6 misdemeanor counts. It is certainly interesting that over a span of a month and a half, the number and severity of the charges against Mr. Siders Sr. has already continued to decrease significantly, with the state already admitting that further investigation continues to be necessary and ongoing, and the defense's investigation still yet to truly begin in earnest.
So here's what I want to leave you with. Investigators have said this case does not involve human trafficking and poses no risk to the general public. But from the first investigation in December to the search on June 30, nearly 7 months passed before investigators entered that house on Ohmer Street. What do you think took so long? And what do you think we still don't know? Tell me in the comments. I'm going to keep digging into the court filings on this one, so if there's an update, you'll see it here first.